We are back. Senators, Twins, baseball, past, present, and future. I'm Ralph Tyko with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and the co-hosts are all here except one. Chad Rubin, still on the DL, set to be back next week. George Case III is here. Ron Rabinovitz is here. And I'm here.
I'm here, too.
Yeah, I know. I'm just going to introduce you. You're a guest, Alan.
A guest?
Alan Blumkin, Sabra superstar. Welcome to the Senator's Show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Good.
Welcome, Al.
For those that don't know, George Case III is the son of a super baseball player in pre-war, war era, a coach, a minor league manager. After that, a baseball lifer, George Case Jr. And I've had the pleasure of having George III, not only as a co-host on this show, but a guest on my podcast a number of times. And I try to find out as much about your dad, George, as I possibly can. And today I'm bringing Alan in to kind of like fresh eyes. In this case, I'd like you, Alan, to satisfy your curiosity and maybe come up with some questions of George III about his dad that I haven't thought of. And why don't you start that off, and we'll go from there.
Okay, your dad was, George, your dad was on the 45 team with the Knuckleballers?
Yes, he was, Alan.
What do you think of all of that starting staff? Because that was basically
well, it was
unique.
very unusual that you had 4 knuckleball pitchers on the same staff, and then to go along with that, they had 3 catchers. So, it was tough to as you know, it's tough to hang on to that knuckleball, and with Washington had 4 of them, and Johnny Nigling and Dutch Leonard and Mickey Hafner and Roger Wolf. So they
because I just did a profile of Dutch Leonard on Facebook several days ago.
Yeah. Well, Dutch Leonard and my dad were very, very close friends. And matter of fact, I had the good fortune to meet Dutch several times. Dutch used to come and visit with my mother and father after the baseball careers had ended, and he used to come up to Pennsylvania, and we had always had a nice visit with Dutch.
George, may I quickly ask you, back in the day when your father's career ended, there weren't card shows and conventions and the like. How did former players meet up with each other? Did they plan anything? This is pre-union days.
Right. Well, what it was in my dad's instance, I can't really speak for a lot of players. I can speak, with regard to my dad and the fact that many of the players on that team would stay in touch, either during the off season or after, their playing careers ended. Mickey Vernon, Dutch Leonard, Cecil Travis, Buddy Lewis, they were all Walter Masters, and they were all very close personal friends. So, through Christmas cards, correspondence, phone calls, that's how they would stay in touch. And you're absolutely correct, Ralph. There were no card shows, memorabilia shows, any of that kind of thing back then. It was really a more personal thing with ball players. And then with fan mail, that used to come, and I always would, I've told other people when my dad would get fan mail, and he had quite a bit of it, some people would enclose money, and my dad would thank the person, sign his autograph, and send the money back. He just did not believe in charging for his autograph the way, some players did.
Good for him.
Right.
Good
yes.
for him.
Absolutely. Alan.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Ask George anything anything you're curious about.
Okay, I see, because I have his page open in Baseball Reference right now, and I see he led the American League in stolen bases 6 times, 5 with Washington, once with Cleveland, and I see by his strikeout numbers he struck out very infrequently.
Well, Alan, you and I had met a couple of times when we were both with Sabre, and
yeah.
I've had a chance to speak about my dad's career often, and the fact that he was a leadoff hitter, was not a power hitter, only had 21 home runs in his career, but he did not strike out very often because his job was to get on base, whether it be a bunt, whether it be a walk, whether it be a base hit. And so his strikeout numbers were very low because he was not trying to swing for the fences because he knew he couldn't do it. So his job, again, was to get on base, and if he was striking out, he certainly wasn't doing his job as a leadoff hitter.
Yeah, when he played with Eddie Yost, he led off.
Yeah, Eddie Yost was breaking in, I think, in
because I think in 1946 was the only year that he was at Cleveland then. I think they traded him because
47 they played together a little bit in Washington. My dad was hurt most of the time, but Eddie was his reputation and his nickname was the walking man. He and my dad were very good friends, and then after my dad's playing career, after Eddie's playing career, Eddie then became a coach with the Expansion Senators, I think in '63.
Yeah, he coached with Joe Hodges. And came with Gil Hodges.
For one game, when Gil Hodges, they were waiting the arrival of Gil Hodges from New York, Eddie Yost was the one-game interim manager for the Expansion Senators.
Well, George, when was the last year that your dad played?
47.
47?
And actually, the last 2 years that he played, in 46 he was at Cleveland, he was hurt a lot. At 47 he was hurt. And really, which forced his retirement. He only played, I think, 30 or 40 games in 47. So, and I mentioned previously, he was only 31 when he retired. Did
he enjoy his time in Cleveland? Was it a good organization?
It was a good organization. Yes, he enjoyed it very much. He had Lou Boudreau, and he had Bob Lemon and Bob Feller were teammates, and Bill Beck was a hands-on owner, and actually. Promoted some opportunities for my dad. So my dad had a good experience in Cleveland. It's just that he was injured and did not have a good year. He only hit, I think, 225, but he did lead the American League in stolen bases with a low total for him, which was 28. But he
was still that fast
in Cleveland.
He was still that fast, wasn't he?
Yeah, he could run, Ronnie, and the fact is that it bothered him. He had a bad back, he had a bad shoulder, and he still kept trying to play, but he missed a lot of those games in the 46 season, and that was a trade that Washington made when Clark Griffith was trying to get a little bit more power in the Washington lineup, and he traded my dad for Jeff Heath. And Jeff Heath was a strong hitter, but had a bad year in Washington. I think he only played half the season, then he was traded. So the trade didn't work out for, either Washington or Cleveland because my dad was hurt a lot in the 46 season as well.
Heath wound up on the Boston Braves. I think he was there for a good portion of 48.
Jeff Heath?
Yeah.
Right.
He was.
Wasn't he in Cleveland too, or was that Jim Heath?
Jim Higgin was the catcher, Ronnie.
Higgin, that's what it was.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Higgin was a great defensive catcher, but he couldn't hit at all. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And ironically, his son was a really good defensive first baseman as well.
Mike
Higgin. Right.
Yeah. So I enjoy hearing stories about baseball families and how stuff is passed down. How did your dad break into professional ball? Was he? Did he come out of college? Did he come out of high school? I know you told me once that Connie Mack scouted him or talked to him.
Right. What
how was it he didn't sign with the A's?
Yeah, with the outcome, what was that all about was, first of all, my dad was a pitcher and second baseman. He was in high school, and he was also a really good basketball player, and he went to Petty School in Hightstown, New Jersey, which was a prep school. Went there for 2 years because he was trying to decide whether he wanted to accept a baseball scholarship to Brown University or turn professional. And my dad had a very good 2 years at Petty, and then Joe Cambria had scouted him, and Joe was the super scout for Clark Griffith, and my dad had gone to a tryout with Connie Mack at Shibe Park, and Connie Mack saw my dad run and saw him hit and told him, he said, your future in baseball is not going to be as a pitcher or second baseman, it's going to be as an outfielder. So he recommended my dad to Clark Griffith, and Cambria and Griffith got together and offered my dad a contract. And it just so happened that his first 2 years playing in professional baseball were in his hometown of Trenton, New Jersey. So he played there in 36 and 37, and then the end of the 37 season, he was called up and started his first major league game at Shibe Park in front of Connie Mack on September 8th of 1937. So, my dad always had a fond affection for Mr. Mack, and always credited Connie Mack with really changing his outlook on baseball, because my dad originally thought, being a pitcher or a second baseman was his future, and Connie Mack was perceptive enough to see that his speed and hitting ability would be wasted if he was pitching, and told him he should think about the outfield, and that's where he wound up playing in the major leagues.
In 1938,
then was in the infield in the majors?
No, he pitched, as far as I know, he pitched one game in the minor leagues when he was Trenton, but his entire professional career, other than that one game, was always as an outfielder.
Yeah, the baseball reference shows him playing all three positions in the outfield.
Right. He did, Alan, and where that came was actually he started as a center fielder, and then the Senators brought in Stan Spence, and so Stan became the center fielder. My dad moved to right, and then when my father hurt his arm, he then moved to left because that was the shortest outfield throw.
Now, his first full season was 1938, George?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, 37, he only really played, I think,
just in September.
3 weeks of the season, and then 38 was his first full season. And, 38, 39, and in 39 he was selected for the 1939 All-Star team. Didn't play in the game because he was hurt. But, that was the first time he had been selected to an All-Star team.
That was a big honor.
Very
big honor. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
George,
who were some of the coaches, either in the minors or majors, that helped tune your dad or teach him stuff that helped him advance?
Well, the one
coaches that he respected,
Ralph, the one coach in particular, and he was very close to my dad, was Clyde Milan. And Clyde Milan was a contemporary of Ty Cobb. Matter of fact, Clyde Milan, his nickname was Deerfoot because he was so fast, and twice he won the American League stolen base title during those years that Cobb was playing. So Clark Griffith brought Clyde Milan out of retirement and wanted him to be my dad's base running mentor. And I have quite a few pictures of my dad with Clyde Milan, and I know that Clyde Milan was the one coach that had the most influence over my dad's career because he taught my father the nuances of how to steal bases. My dad was blessed with natural speed, but you have to know what you're doing when you're a base runner, and that's what Clyde Milan taught him.
Huh.
Right. Do you have any recollections of anything that Milan ever told your dad about Ty Cobb that the average fan might not know?
Well, Ralph, I don't recall anything specifically about Ty Cobb, but I know that Ty Cobb had a reputation of being a mean, ornery SOB, and whether it was deserved.
He was, I think,
He was a great base runner, obviously a great hitter, And, Ty Cobb and Clyde Milan were good friends because they competed against one another. And my dad, I think, probably met Ty Cobb at some place along the line. But I never heard anything, derogatory or any comments my dad ever made about Ty Cobb. And certainly, I think that...
Oh, no, I wasn't looking for derogatory. I was looking for something nice.
Well, the nice things, I think, what it is for a base runner has to be aggressive, and that's what Ty Cobb was.
Well, George, I want to thank you because I always referred to him as Milan, like the city in Italy. I didn't know that Milan was the correct. First time I learned that Milan was the correct pronunciation of his name.
Right. Clyde Milan,
Yeah, and he was a contemporary. He was a contemporary of Walter Johnson. In fact, I think when the scout went out to see they discovered Walter Johnson when a particular scout went out to see Milan play.
Right.
If I get that story correct.
Yeah, no, that's right, Alan, and you certainly are. You were well versed in all baseball history. But Clyde Milan and Walter Johnson were the best of friends, and actually were roommates in Washington. And they both, their careers really were about the same time. And the fact is that Clyde Milan and Walter Johnson were very, very close. And then my dad had the pleasure of having Clyde Milan as his coach, and also Walter Johnson as the 1939 Washington Senators radio man.
Wow. And I also know one of your father's teammates who, unfortunately, his career was derailed by World War II, was Cecil Travis.
Absolutely. My dad always maintained, Alan, and I think if you look up the records, Cecil Travis was totally overlooked by the Hall of Fame. Before he left for World War II, he hit .359 in 1941, was second to Ted Williams in American League batting average, led the American League in hits with 218. Came back from World War II after having his feet frozen in the Battle of Bulge and wound up, I think, the first year back like at 242 or something like that, and 2 years later, Cecil just had to retire because he said he could never regain his timing. And personally, I think that the injuries he suffered, the frostbite he suffered, during the Battle of the Bulge, had a lot to do with it.
I first learned about Travis was from the old Tyko All-Star that spinning game with the discs. I don't know if any of you have ever played that.
Yes, absolutely.
When you were a kid,
I have the game, and I have my dad's disc and all the players, right?
Yeah, because when I got it, unfortunately, I don't have any of this stuff at all. But there was a disc for when they put in the great players. They gave me a Cecil Travis disc, and I had never heard of him.
Right.
So I went to the old Turk and Thompson. I was like 11 years old at the time. I looked them up. That's how I found out about Cecil Travis. Yeah.
Well, you know what, Alan, that's the thing about Cecil Travis. He was very quiet, very modest, just a great player. And the fact that he played in Washington, and on a lot of the teams, rather than playing in a major metropolitan area like in New York with success at the Yankees, but Cecil Travis was a tremendous player, and the players that played with and against him all would mention that. And the fact is, if you do the research and you look, say, my Lord, how could this player with that kind of stats, I think .318 was his career batting average, be overlooked by the Hall of Fame for consideration, never having received even one vote.
Sort of like Alan Trammell now, who I think should go in, but he also was very quiet and played for Detroit for years. But the Hall of Fame is we can get into this ad infinitum, but the whole thing, a lot of it's political.
Absolutely.
Especially when you get to the Veterans Committee. It's very political.
I totally agree with you on that, Alan.
Yeah.
It's very, very political.
And a couple of other teammates I'd like to ask you about, Mickey Vernon and Buddy Meyer.
Right. Well, Mickey Vernon, a lifelong friend. Mickey Vernon and my dad, Mickey broke in 39. my dad was Mickey's first base coach, or third base coach with the expansion Senators. Mickey and his family were lifelong friends of our family, and Mickey was someone who, I greatly admired and very, very quiet, just a real gentleman, but a tremendous player. And there's another player who I think has been overlooked for the Hall of Fame. Almost made it a couple of years ago by the Veterans Committee, but didn't. And then Buddy Meyer, and we've had Gary Sarnoff on a couple times, and Gary has always talked about Buddy Meyer. That's his favorite player. Buddy Meyer was a great player with Washington. They played with my dad, I think, for 3 years before he retired. And actually, my dad took his number 1 uniform when Buddy retired. Buddy had been wearing number 1 for Washington, and then when he retired, Senators, Mr. Griffith, gave number 1 to my father.
Your father was on that.
That's really interesting.
Your father was on that 1945 team that just missed.
Yes.
The pennant, and from what I've read, that they had to finish the season a week early because they had to give the Griffith Stadium over to the Redskins.
That's absolutely true, Alan. That's another fact about that 45 season was so frustrating because nobody expected Washington to be in contention. In 44, they'd finished in last place. In 45, all of a sudden, they're in contention. Well, Mr. Griffith, because his income was derived from Griffith Stadium, had leased, Griffith Stadium to the Washington Redskins for football. So the Senators had to finish their season 1 week early and then sit around and wait until the last day of the regular season to know their fate. And on that day, Hank Greenberg, who had just come back from World War II, hit a grand slam home run in the 9th inning of the last regular season game against the St. Louis Browns, and that clinched the pennant for the Detroit Tigers. The Washington Ball Club was sitting in the clubhouse at Griffith Stadium listening to the game on the radio, not knowing the outcome. If the Tigers had lost, and I think they were supposed to play a doubleheader, the second game was rained out because it wasn't necessary. But if the Tigers had lost, then Washington was going to have to get on a train and get to Detroit for a one-game playoff.
Wow.
George, don't you have any clear memories of any of this?
I'm sorry. I talk about it so much. It's just become natural for me because it's part of my baseball life. And, I happen to speak at various, opportunities. And
I know you do, George. You're
so it's a lot of fun for me.
As is Ronnie. You guys are amazing to hear talk. I'd just love to replay these podcasts with you, George. You're incredible.
Well, thank you very much. And I just wanted to say something to Ronnie. Ronnie, you must be in heaven with the way the Dodgers are playing. And also, the Twins, believe it or not, are hanging in there. I mean, I
know there's a second wild card that they're in definite contention for.
Right.
Well, last night was a brutal loss for them.
The bullpen blew it. The bullpen blew it. They had a 11-6 lead going into the 7th inning, and they couldn't hold it.
Wow.
So they lost 12-11. It was a big loss.
That's the kind of loss.
That was the only loss they had all week. Yeah, that was the only loss they had all week.
Those losses will drive players and managers crazy because it's one thing if you lose 1-0 or something like that, but when you've got a 5 or 6 run lead and your bullpen can't hold it, boy, that's tough.
Right. Sure.
Yeah.
The Detroit scored 6 runs in the last 3 innings.
Yeah.
It was terrible. It was a bad loss.
But
they're only a half a game out of the
bullpen works. You're eating up innings, and I think they went through 3 guys last night.
Well, Barrios only pitched 3 in the 3rd innings. That's what killed the bullpen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bad starts like that.
But the Dodgers are having fun. I love it. They are going crazy.
We don't talk much about the current Washington team, but today's the day to do that because last night one of the really up-and-coming superstars. When I say up and coming, he really has arrived. Bryce Harper hurt himself really badly, ripped up his knee, and I hate to see that in sports.
I do too.
Well, it is, and you know what? The knee injuries are tough, and they're very, very difficult. And sometimes, they can repair them and they'll come back, and sometimes they just can't. But the Washington Nationals, they've had a tremendous year, and I hope that Harper is able to come back because they really depend on him.
He slipped on a wet first base. Can you imagine?
Yeah, right.
That's how he slipped. Yeah.
They were rained out Friday, and there was a delay in the start yesterday. They're playing a day-night today.
Yeah.
That's the Giants.
There aren't many doubleheaders left, and I guess day-night, there's two separate admissions because.
Yeah, they are because they're playing the Giants, and the Giants they're in a one-trip in situation.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I've ranted ranted about the scheduling ever since they put the interleague in as a permanent fixture, and so anything outside the division is a one-trip in at best. Okay, one trip in, so if the game gets postponed, it's very, very hard to make it up. So they make it up in form of a day-night doubleheader today.
Right.
And Harper's been having a phenomenal season. He's hitting .327 with 29 homers and 87 RBIs. It's incredible. It's too bad to see.
And I just want to say, heaven forbid baseball could make it a doubleheader, and they don't.
Yeah, God forbid.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was a kid, there were 23 doubleheaders played a year.
It was great.
Oh yeah.
You know what? It was part of what that came from was the World War II travel restrictions, and so they did play a lot of doubleheaders. As a matter of fact, in one year, and I found it hard to believe. In one year, I think it was 1945. I counted up. Washington had 44 doubleheaders that they played.
Wow.
And
wow.
some of the pitchers and some of the players were saying that they really started to get worn out toward the end of the season because they had to play so many doubleheaders.
Right.
And that was the way they scheduled it back then. I mean, they were, you get 2 games for the price of 1, and that's what happened. Now, today, I don't think there's any scheduled doubleheaders. And
no.
Like Alan's mentioned, you have now day-night doubleheaders if you've had a rain out or whatever, but they are separate admissions, so there's 2 separate games.
The Twins did have one a couple weeks ago where they did a back-to-back doubleheader, which was the first one I think. They did one. It was very unusual. It was the first one they'd ever had for a long, long time.
Wow.
The Yankees had one in May with the Houston Astros, a game that had gotten rained out, and they made it a single admission because the night game was Derek Jeter night. And logistically, it would have been impossible to get people out and get people in, with the ceremony in between. So they bit the bullet and they made single admission, which I'm sure the Steinbrenners were crying in their.
Absolutely.
Hey, Alan, we're talking about the Yankees. I understand now that they're putting some kind of names or something on the back of the Yankees.
Oh, the weekend of the 25th, 26th, and 27th. Every team is changing the shirts, and they're putting nicknames on the back above the number.
Yeah, I know the Dodgers are doing that.
They're all doing it. Every team is doing this.
Yeah.
All the teams are doing okay.
And then they're going to try to sell this stuff.
Right.
Yeah, because it's a variation.
Right.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Well, I just mentioned it because for the Yankees, I mean, that's been something that over the years there had never been a name on the back of the jersey. And,
this is the first time, I said, since 1915 that they're wearing a home uniform without pinstripes.
Yeah, wow.
Now, Al, do you think that they will go back to having names on it after that?
No, I don't think so. No. Let's hope not.
I wonder why.
No, it's like
the team has their names.
That's just their tradition of not changing. Got to respect that.
I think it is a tradition with the Yankees. You look at the pinstripes, you look at the NY on the front of the shirt, and no name on the back. I mean, that's just been the Yankees. That's why I happened to just be looking the other day, and I saw that. I said, "Oh my gosh, I didn't realize all the teams are doing it." But I said, "Boy, that's a radical departure for."
Yeah, it was put together by the players union had an input in this.
Yeah, right.
So they're good with it. So I think they're going to.
But for the
talk is
fans,
they're going to try to sell these.
Why don't they put their names on it now after this?
They said they're going to.
These are just nicknames, not names themselves.
No, I know that. They're nicknames. But I mean, afterwards, why don't they start putting their names on the back of their uniforms?
Because they're not going to break tradition. I wouldn't want them to.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
They said they asked about, I think it was, they asked Sonny Gray about this. They said one of his teammates on the A's was going to wear PTNBL, which stands for player to be named later.
There you go.
Yeah.
That famous player to be named later.
Yeah.
The Twins were 7-3 for the last 10 games, so they're not doing too bad. They're 4.5 games out right now, and they're only a half a game out of the wild card. So hopefully they'll continue to win.
Yeah, Ronnie, I used to kid you about the fact that a long season and that
I remember that.
Now we're in the middle of August and they're still hanging in there. So I think they're doing well.
At this point,
they had slumped a couple of weeks ago and kind of fallen out, and now they're playing some good ball again, and that's nice. Next week, Chad Rubin will be back, and he's going to give us a total analyzation of why they've come back and why they're hanging in there, and we'll get his opinion of whether or not they could make a name for themselves down the stretch. And in the meantime, this has been a terrific show.
It has been.
I really enjoy learning from you guys, and it's a pleasure. That's what I can tell you. So, Alan, if you have any other questions before we hang it up, or Ronnie, if you have any questions of George.
No.
Well,
Alan, it's been a pleasure.
I enjoy talking.
No, I'm done for this.
It's all.
I just want to thank you for inviting me. I've enjoyed this very much, and I hope I made some sort of contribution.
Yes, you did.
Absolutely. Are you kidding me? Absolutely. The knuckleball question alone was worth the price of admission, even in a doubleheader. It's worth the price of the admission of 2 games in one day.
I'll tell you what. You know what? I really enjoyed Alan mentioning that, because not too many people realize that when you talk about knuckleball. Talk about a Hoyt Wilhelm or those kind of guys, but when you look at a starting pitching staff of a major league ball club, and 4 knuckleballs were knuckleballers, and then you had to have 3 catchers because the knuckleballs were wearing the catchers out, so they had to have 3 of them on the roster at the same time they had their knuckleball pitcher.
Wow.
Hey, do you guys remember in the 50s when Paul Richards developed that big glove, that big catcher's mitt?
Yes.
To catch,
I put
I guess it was Hoyt Wilhelm.
Yeah, I put a picture of that the other day on Facebook, Ralph, and that was Paul Richards, who had been a catcher himself, and the fact that he had Gus Triandos, who was Hoyt Wilhelm's favorite catcher, so he thought that he could give Gus, a shot at being able to handle Wilhelm's knuckleball, so he, developed that oversized glove, which I think now I think it's been outlawed, but the fact is that when Wilhelm was pitching and Triandos was catching, he was wearing that oversized catcher's mitt.
Mm-hmm.
Triandos was a hell of a hitter.
Yes.
He wasn't really known for defense, but he could hit.
Very good hitter.
Yeah.
Hey, guys, I have a cute little baseball story I'd like to tell you real quick before we end up.
Please.
It's about Abe and Sam were the best of friends. They'd been friends for almost 70 years. They played when they were kids. They follow all the team statistics and everything. So Abe's in the hospital. He's dying, and Sam comes to visit him. And he says, Abe, he says, you and I, we've been buddies for almost 70 years. You got to do me a favor. When you get up there, you got to somehow let me know if they have baseball up there. Because if they don't have baseball up there, I'm not interested. So Abe passes away. About 3 weeks later, Sam is sound asleep. 3 o'clock in the morning, he hears, Sam, Sam. He opens his eyes. He looks all around the room. He says, yeah. He says, it's Abe. He says, hi, Abe. He says, Sam, I got good news for you and bad news. Well, what's the good news? He says, baseball you wouldn't believe. The most beautiful manicured diamonds you've ever seen. Fans like crazy. I'm playing third base. I'm batting .395. He says, that's fabulous. So now what's the bad news? He says, you're pitching on Tuesday.
Great story, Ronnie. Great story.
Isn't that cute?
I love it, Ronnie.
Yeah.
Okay, guys.
All right.
Thank you very much. And everybody out there, hang in there. Keep on keeping on. And we'll be back next week. Same time. Alan, say it.
Same time, same bat time, same bat channel.
All right.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Alan.
Bye.
Bye, George. Bye-bye. Bye, Ralph.